Hi, Dr. Scott Jensen here. It's 10 o'clock at night, Central Standard Time, Central Daylight Time, excuse me, but there's too much going on to not talk about it. So here we go. The issue has to do with what do fair and trustworthy elections look like? There's a variety of catalysts going on in terms of what's causing the need for this conversation. But I think it's clear right out of the blocks that today in Minnesota, we had Hennepin and Ramsey County indicate that COVID vaccines would be required for election judges in 2022. Seriously. We are not in any kind of a critical situation at all. Schools are meeting once again without masks. The vaccines have been explored and discussed and continue to be explored and discussed. But Hennepin and Ramsey County come out and say that election judges must demonstrate vaccines. All right, that's a problem. I have recently been in the crossfire because I said this at a recent political speech. I said regarding election security, there's a lot of people out there that really do have concerns about our election process in America. A recent article published in numerous sources, but I think particularly in the Star Tribune in Minnesota, indicated that approximately 20% of Democrats felt there were problems with election integrity and more than 60% of Republicans. However you slice it, that's a big number. So I think we can agree that there are issues. So here's what I said about 10 days ago at a speech. I said, we are not voter suppressors. We have a simple attitude. Make sure that every ballot in the box belongs there. Make sure that it's easy to vote, hard to cheat. And if you cheat, you're going to jail. And Steve Simon, you maybe better check out to see if you look good in stripes because you've gotten away with too much, too long, and the hammer's coming down. That's what I said. Now, Simon was asked to respond to these comments of mine in the Star Tribune, and he said these were bizarre and irresponsible remarks and described my speech as a cynical attempt to use extreme conspiracy theories to radicalize political supporters. Well, I just got done telling you 20% of Democrats feel there's a problem with election integrity. 60% of Republicans do. I would remind you that 46 out of 47 countries in Europe use a photo ID mechanism to vote. So why does Steve Simon so instantaneously jump to using the word conspiracy theories? See, this is what's happening. So over the last 24 hours, I have had Dean Phillips in Congress say this. He said, Minnesota is recognized for our secure and fair elections and highest voter turnout in the nation. Highest voter turnout in the nation doesn't equate to secure and fair elections. It could actually work the opposite of that, Congressman Phillips. Phillips also said that I was despicable. Okay, Dean Phillips, in 2016, you tweeted about the fact that the election was not what it could have been. I don't remember your exact words. So in 2016, you've got plenty to say. But in 2022, when I make the comment that if Steve Simon is violating his constitutional oath to uphold the Constitution of Minnesota, he better beware, because if I'm governor, he will be held accountable. Why is what I'm saying such a dramatic thing? Why did it evoke a response from the Washington Post today? And we had our Governor Tim Walz jump in on the Twitter and ridicule something, made some ridicule comment. What I'm telling Steve Simon is you've gotten away with too much for too long. What do I mean by that? Well, Steve Simon arguably is responsible for operationalizing elections in accordance with what the legislature puts in place. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So in 2020, during the pandemic, in the November election, we were not under a lockdown. People were partying, going to restaurants, having beers. The first lockdown was over, and the second lockdown didn't start until 2 weeks later. What did Steve Simon do? Two big things jump out at me. One is he extended the election season by saying that absentee ballots did not need to be in by Election Day. If they were postmarked by Election Day, they would be counted up through November 10th. And he also relaxed the requirement for a witness signature on absentee ballots. These were things he did. He circumvented the legislature. It is the legislature that's responsible for determining how elections will be done. It is the Secretary of State who is to operationalize what the legislature has put in place. Steve Simon did not do that. In the paper today, I have not been getting support even from some of my members of my party. There was a comment, Jensen's campaign did not immediately return a message. I didn't get a phone call. But another leading Republican candidate for governor, State Senator Paul Gazelka, said in an interview, he's, meaning me, Jensen, he's going to have to swim in his own comments. Well, I will swim in my own comments. So let's go back to 2020 when Steve Simon said, okay, listen, we're going to add on 7 more days to the election cycle. So we're going to count ballots up until November 10th rather than cut them off to November 3rd because we're not going to make you have the absentee ballots in and received by Election Day. And he went on to say he was also going to relax the witness signature on the absentee ballots. He was sued in several situations. But this is what was critical. On October 29th, 2020, less than a week before the campaign, before the election, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned Steve Simon's action. His decision to extend ballot counting was overturned. Here's what it said. The ruling orders Simon to set aside all ballots that arrive by mail after November 3rd. After November 3rd. So if they came in November 4th through the 10th, it was not going to be the way Steve Simon had told Minnesota. This ruling in the circuit court dissolved a state district court approved consent decree from August 3rd. The ruling said on October 29th, there is no pandemic exception to the Constitution. The judges wrote, but the Constitution recognizes something else, namely that the design of electoral procedures is at bottom a job for the legislature. It was Simon, the ruling says, who disrupted the status quo by putting the consent decree in play through the courts rather than working through lawmakers. See, here's what happened. Steve Simon tried to get done what he wanted to during the legislative cycle. I was in the Senate that year. That was my last year. He couldn't get it done. So he went through the courts. And in Minnesota, you have a damn good chance of having a liberal judge in front of you. He went through the courts and got a decree that what he was doing when he extended the election cycle and relaxed the witness signatures, he went through the courts. And the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals overruled it and said, no, no, no. What was Steve Simon's response? He said this: I think they got the law wrong. Well, if he thought they got the law wrong, then I would expect that he would have gone to higher levels of courts and gotten it reversed, which did not happen. So let's summarize a little bit. We've got Hennepin and Ramsey County, the two biggest counties in the state, saying that if you want to be an election judge, you have to be vaccinated. Well, it's pretty darn clear that that's going to affect Republican election judges a lot more than Democrat election judges. So I made some phone calls. I made calls to senators and representatives that are very involved in election security, fair and trustworthy elections. What they said was, we need to absolutely stop focusing on the bickering that's partisan. We need to focus on transparency and accountability. And what my comments were the other day were all about accountability. I said, and Steve Simon, you maybe better check out to see if you look good in stripes, because you've gotten away with too much, too long. The Circuit Court of Appeals slapped you down, Steve Simon. They said, you're wrong. You don't get to do this. But you knew that you were wrong because you had already tried to accomplish this earlier in 2020 through the legislative process. And when you couldn't, you and Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, and the Governor, Tim Walz, used emergency powers to beef up your maneuverings. And you put in place specific and special election rules for 2020 using the COVID pandemic. You violated the Minnesota Constitution, according to the Circuit Court of Appeals. That's why I told you, you better beware. Because if I am governor, I will hold you accountable. And if you didn't violate your oath, then you have nothing to worry about. But if you did, you do have something to worry about. Transparency and accountability. Congressman Dean Phillips using words like despicable. Tim Walz already out there fundraising off of my comments. The governor of Minnesota has already put out emails fundraising because of my comments. Folks, you should be sick and tired of politics. This has nothing to do with the fact that 20% of Democrats are concerned about election security and fair and trustworthy elections, and 60% are Republicans. It has nothing to do with that. These leaders, Simon, Ellison, Walz, they don't care. They're going to jam it down your throat. So what is the Senate doing today in Minnesota? They are trying to have live streaming of ballot board proceedings so that when absentee ballots come in, the ballot board proceedings would be live streamed and transparent. Also, drop boxes. Drop boxes are already to be recorded, but the Senate is working, and Senator Mary Kiffmeyer in particular is working to have the drop box locations live streamed. We need to elevate transparency. Bad stuff, as Senator Kiffmeyer mentioned to me when I talked to her on the phone, bad stuff flourishes in the dark. It's no different than trying to cheat on your second grade spelling test. If the teacher steps out of the room to get a drink of water, you have a much better likelihood that some student might look at another student's paper. We're trying to do the same thing with elections this year. We're simply trying to make it transparent so that there's accountability. Dean Phillips sounded off about the 2016 election. Millions and millions of Americans sounded off regarding the hanging chads in 2000 and the fact that we didn't know who our president was until December of 2000. We didn't learn that in November. There has been bickering on both sides. The Secretary of State is charged with fair and trustworthy operationalization of the election laws of the state in the Constitution, which are determined by the legislature. Now, I know that tomorrow we're going to see Steve Simon and Tim Walz and Keith Ellison say that what happened was because of the COVID pandemic, and it had to happen. People were going out to dinner. People were going to the pub. There was no lockdown in place. Let's stop the politicking. What was done because of politics. So these are difficult times. Yes, I'm running to be governor. I'm Scott Jensen, and I've been running for 15 months. And I have said I will go in places I'm not supposed to go when it comes to difficult conversations. I have said over and over again for 15 months that we need to work towards secure, fair, and trustworthy elections because it's a pillar of the American democratic experiment. The European countries use photo ID. I think some 70% of American citizens favor this. But the political class, not so much. They know what they've got going. They know how to play the game. And I guess it's a little bit like speeding. If you speed and you go 7 miles an hour over the limit, you're probably not going to get a ticket. But if you go 17 miles over the limit, you may well get a ticket. Where's the sweet spot? Steve Simon, I said it 10 days ago in a speech, and I'll say it tonight again. If I can demonstrate, or the courts demonstrate, that you violated your oath of office to uphold the Constitution of Minnesota, you will be held accountable. You did not have the right to unilaterally make the changes you made prior to the 2020 election. The Circuit Court of Appeals said so as well. And I think there were things that they didn't adjudicate that would have gone against you as well. And the fact that you weren't able to get that decision by the Circuit Court of Appeals reversed speaks volumes. So Minnesotans, you're going to have to play a big role in our elections in November of 2022. Because if we've got 20% of Democrats concerned about our election fairness and 60% of Republicans, we've got a problem. And I think it needs to be fixed. What we're seeing is politics at just a rabid level. I think tomorrow, in light of the fact that the Supreme Court is going to be deciding on Roe v. Wade, I think you're going to hear a lot more screaming and a lot more hyperbole. I saw a tweet tonight from a fellow named Ken Martin, who is the head of the Minnesota Democratic Party. He couldn't restrain himself. In his tweets, he couldn't even use a word other than effing. He had to use that word. Seemed like he lost his cool. It doesn't seem like the rules are the same for both sides. But when it comes to Minnesota elections, if I'm governor and the Secretary of State can be demonstrated to have violated his oath to uphold the Constitution of Minnesota, might not be a bad idea for him to know what he looks like wearing stripes. Good night, Minnesota. It's late, and I'm really disappointed in the political class.